And others that are in attendance today are Hannah Oden, Jeanette Duren, Charles Stack, Paula Bloomer, Ben Elias, David Robinson, Christina McVie, Dr. Laura Norman, Brianne Weishman, sorry, your name is cut off. I can't see your second last name. Don Garcia, Sara Rodriguez, Mead Meyer, Barbara Johnson, Melanie Alvarez, Crystal Spires, Dustin Fitzpatrick, Jeff Hildebrand, Katie Predick, Abigail Okrent, David Mitchell, and Teresa Bravo. And we will move on to agenda item number 2, the in-kind form. And Hannah, you want to go ahead and read that?
Sure. Excuse me. All right, good morning, everyone. So the in-kind forms, the regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAC collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. So if you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. Hearing none. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RT initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds.
All right, thank you so much. And we will move on to agenda item number 3, the approval of the October 6th EPAC meeting summary. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review that summary. Anybody want to make a motion to approve or make any changes? Christina?
Move to approve.
All right, and a second?
A second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and the approval of we've approved the minutes for the last meeting, and we'll move on to agenda item number 4. So at this meeting, this is my last meeting as chair. I have now served my full 2-year term. And so I'm going to pass it off to Hannah so that we can discuss the nomination for the new chair and vice chair. Go ahead, Hannah.
All right, thank you, Natalie. So yes, as you mentioned, so the EPAC chair and vice chair serve for 2-year terms, and the limit for the current chair and vice chair has expired. So it is time for EPAC to nominate and vote on a new chair and vice chair, which is what this agenda item will accomplish. So before we get into nominations, I just want to thank you, Natalie, for serving as the EPAC chair for these past years. We've truly appreciated your leadership and time and effort successfully leading us through the meetings and your dedication to the committee. And I also want to thank Christina McVie for serving as the vice chair and providing great support and dedication to EPAC as well. So thank you both so much for your dedication and commitment. So we do have one nominee for chair and one nominee for vice chair. So the chair nomination is Abigail Okrent. So Abigail Okrent is an environmental quality manager with the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality. She is a lawyer, and the entirety of her legal and policy career has been spent in public interest, nonprofit, and government work. She is a community organizer by training and inclination and speaks Spanish conversationally. I do want to point out that there has been some recent membership updates to Pima County, and Abigail has been designated as one of the official representatives by Pima County and is a voting member of EPAC, so she is eligible to serve as chair. The nomination for vice chair is Paula Bloomer, who is an environmental project manager with the town of Marana. So Paula has worked at the town of Marana going on 19 years, 14 years of which have been in the environmental division of the town. Her main focus has been the town's municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4 program. But in the last few years, she has taken on other areas such as cultural resources, Section 404 regulations, and wildlife issues. She has been on PAG's Watershed Planning Subcommittee and currently participates in PAG's Stormwater Working Group. So Paula is the official EPAC representative for the town of Marana, and is also a voting member. So she is also eligible to serve as vice chair. So at this time, just to make sure we didn't miss any nominations, if there are any additional nominations to serve as chair or vice chair for eligible voting members, we can take those now. And if not, Natalie, I'll turn it back to you for a call for a motion.
Any other nominations? All right, then I would like to call for a vote of the nomination of the new chair and vice chair.
Madam Chair, move to approve.
Wonderful. Any second?
I second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. The motion to approve the new chair and vice chair has passed. Thank you very much. And we look forward to having you, Abigail, lead the next meeting, which will be early next year. Welcome aboard. Kimberly, would you mind muting? Or did you have something you wanted to say? Okay, sorry. Good. We could just hear a little shuffling in the background there. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 5, the update to the PAG Air Quality Management Plan, the 208 plan. And Mead Meyer will provide that update for us. Go ahead, Mead. Is Mead here? Uh-oh.
Let me check.
I don't see her, but she was on earlier, so we must have lost her.
Maybe
Do you want to come
she's
back to
also-
this item?
Yeah, maybe she's also
I'm
having
back.
technical difficulties.
Okay.
Oh, there she
I'm
is.
back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Just as you said my name, it shut down.
Okay, yeah, we're both having some technical issues this morning. Maybe something's going on in the solar system. All right, are you ready? Take it away, Mead.
Okay, great. I don't have slides for you today, so I'm doing the old-fashioned. Can you see it? I think it's not going to work on Zoom. This is my material to
There it
share.
is. That's in focus now. You just
Yeah.
keep it right there.
Yep.
Okay. So my update, as you see on the agenda, is about the PAG area-wide water quality management plan that you often hear us call the 208 plan. It's this big item here. Many of you helped us update this with a comprehensive update in 2020. And the way we keep it up to date year to year so that it has up-to-date information is by coming to the committees and notifying you about the updates we've found and come across in the community, and then asking for further input. So each year we present this opportunity. This is your notice today. We welcome updates to new water issues, accomplishments throughout the region related to water, and any updates to recommended actions that may be next steps for those areas of accomplishment. And then the results get entered administratively into our 208 plan. So in that 2020 update to our plan, we adopted this procedure that allows us to make these updates administratively as long as we follow the requirement to give this notice to the committees and an opportunity to review. So along with this notice, a memo will be sent to Regional Council once those are reviewed by those interested. Just to give you a little more context, updates come from committee members, reaching out to us, ADQ and EPA notices, recent studies that we're aware of, and so sort of the information we come across. Then every 5 years, we do a more comprehensive update to ensure that all the categories throughout the plan are reviewed. So that update would occur not until 2025, but time is flying. So these annual updates help us to stay, make that comprehensive plan update a little bit more manageable. So I wanted to thank those who have already provided information. We received information from each of the designated management agencies under our 208 plan. So that's the three public wastewater entities, Marana, Sahuarita, and Pima County. So they provide us facility updates. And for those who might want a little more background on 208 planning, our role at PAG is to review permits for wastewater discharge to ensure they comply with our local policies. So we try to keep ahead on anticipated changes to wastewater facilities and encourage our policies during the development of those facility plans, such as multi-benefit approaches that encourage recharge or environmental benefits and reuse of wastewater and public regionalization of the wastewater. So here's a quick list. I won't go into detail, but sort of the categories of updates we received. We did notice several website updates. Pima County EDQ have gone through website updates. So we've updated some of our data sources. As I mentioned, the wastewater facilities inventory gets up to date through our DMAs. Some water quality issues updated. For example, there's been a lot of development in the emerging contaminants area, a lot of regulatory updates related to PFAS that you've heard about at EPAC. So we try to tie a lot of these updates to the presentations you receive as well. Landfills, that's another one that's gained a lot more attention over time in the region, kind of calling for better inventories of historic landfills because it affects where we're able to recharge water. Surface and groundwater conditions that have changed through releases of ADQ information. So those are the categories. We do appreciate review before it's finalized, so just contact us. If you send an email to 208info@pagregion.com, that comes to both Melanie and I, so it gets put in our docket. But I wanted to spend a little more time on one final category, which is the groundwater resource conditions. This ties into our next presentation. Also, I wanted to back up and say it's no coincidence that the issues list that you're going to see later has most of these updates I just listed in a little more detail, but not as much detail as we are able to put in the plan. That's because we utilize this existing resource, the annual issues list, as to streamline our process and put it into a resource you already work with and that regional council is used to seeing. So it's a nice, efficient method for us. I have a few more visuals that I hope work. We have an ongoing issue with E. coli. This is showing up in our in our effluent, but not in our effluent dependent river, but not due to wastewater. It's due to stormwater inputs. Why? Because of some sort of poop out there that's making its way into the stormwater. And this has been an ongoing issue. We don't know the source of it though. So if you don't speciate whether it's canines or maybe due to an increasing unsheltered population that lives in the washes, then you can't address it properly. So that's one of the examples of what we call for is our recommended action is utilize funds to speciate and create appropriate outreach or whatever the measure would be to address it. There are associated 604B funds. That's what calls the funds that fund both PAG and a competitive grant system that you've probably heard about. And those are best when tied into the PAG plan, because we can then make the recommendation. You know, it's a top issue. We will support it. We've helped to advise grants development. And of course, and then it ties into the long-term planning process, which I think is more effective. So finally, let me make sure I didn't miss an issue. Oh, yes. So in that long-term planning update, the comprehensive one, that's when we can consider updates to the first chapter, not just the appendices of the plan. That's where the policies are. So procedures, if they need to be improved. And there have been some discussions about policies such as decentralizing some of the public wastewater system to encourage recharge where it's needed most. And there are already efforts underway. So we wanted our policy to match what people, the jurisdictions are needing. That can be considered in the future. You can join that conversation in our watershed planning subcommittee. Now back to what I was saying about that final topic, groundwater resources. So this is an area that was identified in the basin study that many of you are involved in, as well as many recent efforts. What we recommended in the plan was that we need to monitor the effectiveness of restoring our uplands and stream restoration projects in order to show that these low impact development or erosion restoration techniques have an impact and can raise shallow groundwater levels. And this was identified, I think, in 2018 when we were drafting the last update to the comprehensive update to the plan. Since that time, there has been major progress, and Laura Norman is one of those leaders. She has been measuring the impacts of these types of methods. She'll let you know all about, I imagine she'll let you know all about beaver dam analogs, but mimicking natural systems in a healthy state. So we bring you this presentation today in part because we identified it as a priority and because she is one of those helping to create accomplishments in this region. And I hope that provides a good example of how this process works. That's what I've got for you today.
All right. Thank you so much, Mead. It looks like Christina has her hand up. Christina?
Mead, thank you. That was excellent. I do have a question in terms of recharge. Did that include for your update the Green Valley proposal to do recharge there for similar sort of thing to the heritage effort of the city of Tucson and the Santa Cruz? In other words, in-channel recharge?
Yes, it's a good example of following like that recommendation of using a multi-benefit approach. I know it's in preliminary phases, but we always include plans and without like a strict requirement to adhere to those plans, but like sort of the preliminary concepts do go into our plan to say that they're in development.
Right. And another area that might be of interest would be the Sopery Wash. I'd like to just put that out there as a possible future option, seeing as how the county basically controls most of it, even in Santa Cruz County. And it's the highest point in our watershed for that type of recharge. And to the best of my knowledge, not adversely impacted by landfills, which is a constant problem. Thank you so much, Mead, for your work.
I'll look into that and might reach out to you.
Barbara?
So,
oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were.
Oh, just on the same note, there is a tour of that Green Valley project next. I think it's Thursday. It's December 7th, held through the Santa Cruz Watershed Collaborative and supported by a grant that the Sonoran Institute won to explore that in-stream recharge approach in Sahuarita and Green Valley.
Great. Thank you. Barbara?
Hi, I hope this unmute works. I just had a couple of quick questions. Thank you, Mead, and I will attend the December 7th field trip. So you said that you wanted input prior to the next update, but you talked about yearly updates and then a 2025 update. Could you give us the dates of those updates so that we know to get our comments in time, please?
You know what? I hadn't come up with a deadline. So usually notice about this time of year. I would like to get the update up to the regional council by their last spring meeting at the latest. So by the end of January would help us to put things in motion.
Okay, I had a couple more questions if I may. So where is the plan that we're supposed to review? Where would I find it?
Good question. So normally I can just email it to you for ease. And I'm sorry I don't have slides to tell you, but if you go to our PAG website, under water quality, you'll see 208 plan. And that's where it's posted.
Okay.
But that's the current plan. So if you want to see the draft edits in detail, we've got the red line, and we appreciate expert review. So I can email that to you.
Okay, I'll send my email through that source that you provided earlier. So I'll go ahead and do that. And also, when I do get to the plan, I assume that we'll be able to see things like where the landfills are relative to both groundwater and surface water. You know, what exactly we have done in terms of review of permits to ensure alignment with the policies, and all of those results that would be included in those sources for us to review.
Yeah, and I can help you find them because they are in a few areas. So like the permits are in one section, and then the issues are described in another.
Okay.
But we also have an online interactive map, so you can explore where are the landfills, and it's using our last inventory. So we hope to update that inventory to make sure it's accurate. But we also have an interactive map. It's in the it's also on the PAG web page under interactive maps, and it's called water accounting.
Okay, I'm new to EPAC, so probably everybody else already knows all this. So I'll be in touch with you and dive into this and to try to provide you some good input. Also, the San Javier district is updating a comprehensive plan. We're just getting started on that. So some of these issues we may want to incorporate, or we might want our plan to influence. So thanks for your presentation.
Those are great questions, and it's my fault that I didn't put the links on the screen. So I will make sure to send those out.
No
Yeah.
worries.
So Mead, if you could just send it out to the whole committee, I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
Will this committee ultimately be approving this plan? Is that how that works, or?
Yeah, the committee, yeah, the comprehensive updates occur every 5 years, and that's when you do a official approval.
Okay, so yeah, I think it would be good for everybody to have all that information since it will be coming to us for approval.
And we'll do a much more formal, in-depth review at the meeting, and maybe several meetings to show you the updates at that time.
Okay, but you will be able to send out everything to the committee.
Yeah.
For the draft version.
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Barbara, you still have your hand up, but I'm assuming that's from your previous question. So we will go ahead and thank you so much, Mead, for that update. And we'll look forward to hearing more from you in the near future. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 6. We're going to be discussing natural infrastructure in dryland streams with Dr. Laura M. Norman. She is a supervisory research physical scientist at the U.S. Geological Survey, where she has worked since 1998. Her research combines remotely sensed imagery and other geospatial data in complex hydrological, hydraulic, and LULC models to predict the source, fate, and transport of non-point source pollutants, consider potential growth scenarios, and document impacts of change. So we'll let Dr. Norman take it away.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I don't know why my camera isn't working. It worked when I first logged on, but I'm here.
We're all having technical problems this morning.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that, but okay. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I appreciated your nice introduction, Mead. That was perfect for the slides that I'm about to present. So if you can hop right into the next slide, I can begin. So I want to plant the seed in your minds right now related to our larger biosphere. This photo on the right is a picture of David Latimer, an internet sensation who has grown a garden sealed inside a giant glass bottle. The legend has it that I placed some compost and a quarter pint of water into this 10-gallon glass vessel and inserted a water spout. In 1972, he opened it a little bit of water.
I'm sorry to cut in. I think, Dr. Norman, you're having an issue with your sound. Your voice is very broken up.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can.
And I want to hear all of this. So.
Okay. All right, let me see.
Me too. I've waited a long time to hear her present.
Oh.
There we go.
Let's see.
And your camera's back on.
There's the camera, yeah.
Okay, good. Let me see if I can now get a hold of the volume problem. Okay, does that help?
No. For now, it does. We'll have to see if it lasts. So, if you want to keep talking, we'll let you know if it. Keep talking, we'll let you know if it.
Okay.
Now there's some feedback.
Right.
Now there's some feedback. I'll stop talking.
Is there feedback when I speak?
No, it's when I speak. So if I stop, it should solve it.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to use a different microphone. So, okay. So I'm not sure where you guys left off, but I was presenting this slide with this guy in England who put this plant in this bottle in 1960 and watered it once since then, but otherwise it's been sealed. So it all it needs is plenty of sunlight. So I don't know the validity of this story really, but it gets me thinking about functional ecosystems, greenhouses, desert ecosystems, and water availability.
Your sound is
And the recycling.
your sound is off again. Your sound is off again. Do you want to try turning off your camera?
Okay.
And then whatever you did with the sound.
Does this help? Can you hear
Yep.
me right now?
Yes. Thank you.
You can? Okay. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Let me know if it stops again and I'll try again. So I appreciate that. So I was just talking about the recycling of water and cycling of bacteria in the compost that eats the dead plant and breaks down the oxygen given off by plants and then turning it into carbon dioxide for photosynthesis that the plants need to survive in that cycle that's occurring inside this. So this is the science of ecohydrology, an interdisciplinary field studying the interactions between water and ecological systems and can provide an understanding of the feedback mechanisms between ecological processes and the soil conservation hydrological cycle. Next slide. So in thinking about relevant applied science and the driver of my research at the USGS in the desert environment that we live in and the influx of population and growing needs, as well as our ongoing drought, the main question a lot of people have on their minds is how can land and water resource managers reverse degradation in dryland streams to support population growth and sustainable development in a changing climate? Next slide. One idea that's been suggested by restoration advocates is to use rock detention structures, also known as erosion control structures, check dams, plugs, chinchillas, near alignments, one rock dams, renewals, and or gabions. Generally, these are loose rock structures built to slow flows and allow for the slow release of water downstream and into dam channels. They are also meant to reduce sediment and reduce erosion. Next slide. Down here in the North American Southwest, rock detention structures have long been used by indigenous cultures, documented throughout the last millennium, specifically for the benefits associated with farming in a dry land. Here's a picture of a series of loose rock structures placed in channels where terrace farming was employed by the Mogollon people over 1,000 years ago. Mead, do you have a question right now?
No, your voice started to go out only for a second and then it came back.
Okay,
It
let me
may
know.
You might have to mute one of your mics.
Okay, Mead, wait, it'll be best
that?
if you just disconnect and try to come back on real quick. It'll be worth taking the minute to do that.
Okay, I did just turn off the old mic that I thought was faulty. Can you hear me now?
Yes, but
Okay.
we lost the feedback,
Oh, you
so
can?
that's good. No,
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I'll
if you
keep
can,
going. If we have the issue again,
sorry,
want
the
me to
feedback
disconnect and try again?
is hard. Yeah, if you can disconnect and reconnect to the Zoom.
Thank you, Crystal. That would be great because we do want a recording of this.
I'm sorry. I was trying to talk with the feedback was really hard.
No, you're doing great.
There's definitely something going on with
Thank
all
you.
of us having these issues today. It's interesting.
There's a lot of us on and a lot of cameras on, so sometimes that makes it harder.
Yeah, if everyone
If
can
anyone,
turn off their
Oh,
cameras and
all right, we'll just give her a minute to reconnect. There you are. Okay, we see your camera, but you're muted.
Let's see if this can work.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good so far. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I was talking about these old structures, and then next slide. So working with anthropologists and scientists from the Tree Ring Lab here in the US and Mexico, we published a summary of these infrastructure and their applications this year, noting that many indigenous cultures that persist on the landscape today are still employing them. Next slide. And here's pictures of some of those 1,000-year-old structures that still exist on the landscape today without any maintenance. Not saying that structures don't need maintenance, but they can survive. Next slide. And as many of you know, the CDC installed throughout the US for soil and water control measures with lots of these structures also evidenced on the landscape today. Next slide. Restoration practitioners are installing rock detention structures now to try to accomplish all these things: support vegetation, harvest water, and control erosion. And rock detention structures are also being suggested as a tool used to restore degraded landscapes and rehydrate dryland systems. Next slide. But many questions arose around the efficacy and use of this nature-based solution to help landscapes recover. And that spans a large, huge suite of scientific disciplines. So how structures impacting the ecoregion, what changes in land use and then cover can be detected, does vegetation respond positively to structure installation, habitat are affected, how does surface water volume and rate get impacted by structures? How does that influence soil moisture and groundwater recharge? What is the sediment response to structures? How does that impact carbon and nitrogen cycles? Are investments in furthering this restoration valuable for the long term? Do the costs and benefits of riparian restoration balance out? And also, what is the most effective way to monitor the success rates of rock detention structures? Next slide. So in 2010, the USGS started investigating these questions and the scientific impact of rock detention structures using remotely sensed imagery, watershed and hydraulic models, and various eco-hydrologic monitoring in the arid water harvesting study to quantify metrics related to the installation. Next slide. And also determine metrics to discern effectiveness of internal applications using rock detention structures with quantifiable results. We're working with partners to determine where these structures should be. And experiments and publications addressing ecosystem services of rock detention structures now. Summarized in publication at the bottom of this slide. Next slide. This is a map showing some of the multiple publicly and privately owned landscapes in the Mariana Archipelago ecoregion with the selection I'm going to step through today. Next slide.
I'm gonna stop you for just a minute. We're still having you cut out pretty bad, and I know people are struggling and they really want to hear what you're saying. Would it be possible for you to call in from your cell phone if I give you that information?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great idea.
I'm sorry. Let me pull that up for you real quick so that you can call in.
Thank you so much, Crystal and Laura.
I apologize. I don't know what's happening with technology today. I guess it's December. Take me 1 second just to pull that. If you want to get your cell phone, I'll give you the phone number to call in.
Crystal, this is not your fault, but thank you so much because it is so important.
Yeah, and she's got a lot of slides to go through, so I want to make sure we can actually hear what she's telling us. Okay, so the phone number is going to be area code 346-248-7799.
The meeting ID?
And then 861-658-6910. And then I'll give you the participant ID.
It needs a pound after that number too.
It says I'm, oh. Okay, it says I'm in, but you don't hear me.
Okay, hold on, let's see. Yep, we've got you here, so let me
unmute me.
You just, yep. So go ahead and unmute. You should be able to unmute your phone and disconnect the others once we can hear you. It's showing that you're muted on the phone.
Okay, I'm in.
There we go.
Yay. Okay, perfect.
All right. Thank you both so much.
All right, I'm going to turn my volume down because this is creepy. Okay. You'll have to yell to get me to stop now. Okay, so if you could go to the next slide. I wanted to start over here in the colonias of Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, and Nogales, Arizona. where normal rainfall has the potential of realizing abnormal runoff that augments the loss of life and property through flooding, soil loss, and watershed capacity for vegetation, and non-point source pollution of shared drainages and infrastructure via sediment and solid waste. This hazard is the #1 priority for the state of Arizona's Department of Emergency Response due to extreme flooding that occurs here every summer, taking lives and ruining livelihoods. Next slide. In 2009, the International Boundary and Water Commission hired me to model the potential impacts of such interventions, installing rock detention structures, gabions, which are caged riprap structures, around the perimeter of the watershed to reduce flooding occurring in the colonias. Next slide. I retrofit gabions into channels in watershed models to consider their impact. And here you can see the peak flow with no gabion in red versus the peak flow of having a gabion in blue for a 10-year event, which reduces it by half, versus the 100-year event, which has a lesser effect. So the larger flows may need more than one structure or some additional maintenance. And also the model predicted sediment reduction if structures are installed, which would help improve water quality downstream and reduce the impact on infrastructure. Next slide. This natural infrastructure lowers peak flows and helps to negate those overbank flows that can be hazardous and even deadly. Gabions were installed and water is regulated by these structures, stored in the system for longer periods of time and slowly released. Next slide. At San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge on the U.S. side of the border, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service began working with Cuenca Los Ojos on the south side of the border in the late 1990s to restore the historic binational San Bernardino ciénaga, an extremely valuable large wetland habitat with these same rock structures. We analyzed 30 years of Landsat imagery and documented a pronounced decline in vegetation associated with declining precipitation. However, at locations where natural infrastructure were installed, vegetation was maintained or increased, despite the long-term drought conditions. Additionally, increased vegetation at structures was documented up to 5 kilometers downstream and 1 kilometer upstream of each structure. And if I can just point out here that these photo series from 2001, 2004, 2011, and most recently from 2023 that portray how the system responds. So in this study, we documented that over time, gabions help to promote plant growth and extend valuable growing seasons in dryland streams. And this is what the ancient farmers had been capitalizing on. Next slide. In the Coronado National Forest, the owners of the El Coronado Ranch installed over 2,000 small rock detention structures throughout a 769 square kilometer watershed. We monitored and documented the same decrease in peak flows with these structures that we had seen in Nogales, and also increased volumes of water being discharged over time by 28%. Increased volumes of water by 28% in this treated watershed compared to a controlled watershed in a paired watershed analysis. So the structures are a climate adaptation strategy that reduce flooding, but also harvest rainfall and augment water supplies, extending seasonal water availability in arid environments. Next slide. Using a calibrated watershed model, we estimated that approximately 210 tons of sediment was stored behind these little structures per year. Soil conservation is critical for plants, animals, and water supply. In watersheds where increases in rainfall and associated stormwater runoff lead to polluted water, this prevents sediment transport and deterring water quality. Is a climate adaptation strategy. In addition, air quality is improved with increased vegetation and erosion control via the mitigation of dust storms. Next slide. We studied the soils being stored behind structures using isotope analysis. And this study was led by Dr. James Caligari at the USGS, and we conservatively estimated the potential mean capture of organic carbon by check dams to be approximately 200 to 250 metric tons per hectare. These are similar rates of carbon sequestration as that documented in wetlands, due to their ability to capture soil, increase productivity and water availability, and store carbon underground. Next slide. At the Baba Kamari Ranch in the San Pedro watershed, the Walton family hired Borderlands Restoration Network to install a series of gabions to see if they could improve recharge there. Working with a wonderful student, Chloe Fandel from the University of Arizona, who did these beautiful diagrams as well, she collected field measurements at gabions and modeled those that demonstrated the increased soil moisture at structures by an average of 10%. Next slide. When that's woven into a larger integrated hydrologic model, oh, that's backwards, I think. Then one more to, there you go. The integrated hydrologic model results depict the potential of watershed-wide gabion installation to increase total aquifer recharge by a minimum of 4%, with noted increases in subsurface connectivity and accentuated lateral flow contributions. So these structures are an adaptation strategy that can be used to avert risks associated with drought and water shortages by providing increased water storage in shallow aquifers underground. Next slide. And in thinking about the desert, like you, I often wonder, why is it raining over there and not here in my backyard? Although right now it is actually raining in my backyard, which is fantastic. What mechanisms are in circulation that make it rain? Some of these have already been touched upon, the runoff, infiltration, and I'm about to say something about the sponge, but what climatic impacts like haze versus cloud formation are being impacted when the water cycle is affected and more water is held in a system? Next slide. We had one project with the Bureau of Reclamation led by Deborah Toslin, working with climate scientists from NAU and restoration practitioners from Natural Channel Design to test and document one rock dam structures in the city of Phoenix, one of the hottest cities in the US. Results from this research mimicked the results that we'd had in the Madrean ecoregion, with decreases in peak flows and increases in infiltration at structures. And they also suggest a 3-degree microclimate cooling effect for at least 2 days following rainfall at treated sites. This climate mitigation strategy of installing rock detention structures will definitely also have cumulative effects as vegetation and soil increase. Next slide. So we researched, tested, documented all the impacts of rock detention structures presented so far, finding the benefits defined here as ecosystem services. This natural infrastructure can be placed throughout dryland stream watersheds and strategically situated to alleviate flooding, erosion, and sediment transport, create habitats, sequester carbon, grow food, and also to help communities adapt to changing climate. This is an ecosystem-based approach to climate change adaptation and mitigation that is supported by science and helps reduce risk to climate-related disturbances. Next slide. Now, I know you're all sitting there as Mead alluded to the original ecosystem engineers who also create and enhance nutrient-rich, waterlogged wetland habitat. And you may know that in 1950, beaver paratroopers were launched by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game as outpost agents of flood control and soil conservation. Next slide. But also, as you may know, beaver populations have famously shrunk, and even the natural range of the North American beaver has changed from what it used to be. In 2015, this guidebook was developed by Dr. Michael Pollock et al. to teach people how to best welcome beaver back into the ecosystem, and it can be downloaded from the Fish and Wildlife Service website, describing how to work with beavers to restore wetlands, streams, and floodplains. Next slide. Also in 2015, he co-authored this idea of a beaver dam analog, or BDA. Beaver dam analogs are channel spanning structures that mimic or reinforce natural beaver dams and establish a starting point to invite beavers in. Next slide. There are a lot of people who feel that beavers are the only solution and the only way to invoke natural-based restoration that dryland streams so desperately need. And research by beaver scientists documents very similar findings that we are seeing related to rock detention structures. I first became aware of this when I read an article by Wally McFarlane, who I got to meet when visiting the Nature Conservancy's Canyonlands Research Center in Utah last year. And then I saw this excellent diagram just published by Alan Puttock et al. That describes the increased lateral flows that I mentioned that we are observed when beavers install their dams and streams, which is exactly what I had found at the Baba Kamari Ranch related to rock detention structures. Next slide. Beaver dams and their analogs can be a cost-effective natural restoration tool that promotes drought and climate resiliency. This photo shows a landscape scorched by fire, also in Idaho, where the beaver pond-infused riparian area and series of wetland ponds deflect wildfire spread and serve as natural refugia during a burn. Next slide. So there are two camps in watershed riparian restoration, and there actually seems to be some animosity between them. Those who advocate for beaver dams and their analogs, and those who advocate for rock detention structures. However, proponents of BDAs say that BDAs themselves can serve as a beaver dam, even if beavers can't be accommodated. So humans can make beaver dams satisfactorily to achieve these results. My colleague, Emily Fairfax, a professor in ecohydrology, sent these photos to me. They are all the same structure, where the top two pictures are a beaver dam in early stages of construction, and the bottom are the same dam fully constructed. So beavers can install rock detention structures too, and often do start their beaver dams that way. In fact, I saw some up by Mammoth the other day, for which the beavers had started by rolling boulder-sized rocks into the channel before adding their sticks. So next slide. So I collaborated with an amazing group of scientists who have been researching structures and the physical environment with unbiased observation and systematic experimentation to quantify the impacts of both and compare research findings of the impacts of rock detention structures with beaver dams and their analogs, which we collectively are calling natural infrastructure in dryland streams, or NIDS. Next slide. Together, we documented that any of these natural infrastructure in dryland streams, regardless who is making them or what materials they are using, can provide the same suite of ecosystem services I've just outlined, framing our collective knowledge. Next slide. For example, we documented rates of soil carbon storage in all of these natural infrastructure in dryland streams, or NIDS, including rock detention structures, beaver dams, and their analogs, to compare with naturally occurring wetlands and coastal estuaries, finding similar rates of sequestration around the western United States. Next slide. In 2022, I began working with one of my co-authors, Dr. Ratan Lal, and his group in Ohio to understand how land management and agricultural practices affect carbon storage in our region and can give us insight to global trends. Landscape degradation is associated with a loss of soil carbon, but ecological restoration, including the installation of NIDS in different agricultural processes, can reverse that trend. 2023 was the first year of a 5-year study to quantify soil carbon storages at sites across southeastern Arizona to promote management options. So we're still working on permits for some of these locations now, but have collected a lot of soil samples, 700 soil samples so far. Next slide. Dry mountain canyon washes are the gateways for nearly all the soils in the basin and range. And when soils are dry, vegetation dies off and gullies are carved into the alluvial sands. Next slide. What we are seeing on the landscape based on anthropogenic impacts and/or climate variability is the regular processes leading to degradation. Exposed soils or bedrock lets or even promotes rainwater runoff before it can soak in, exacerbating vegetation die-off, erosion, and gullying, and ultimately results in flooding downstream. But this cyclical feedback can be reversed and systems can be rehydrated. NIDS retain sediment and reduce erosional forces. They can detain water long enough to soak into the soil, distributing it throughout the landscape and allowing vegetation to take root and flourish. Over time, water can accumulate to support lateral flows and percolate into groundwater. Soil remains moist year-round, roots and biomass flourish, and cooling moisture and humidity rehydrate systems. Next slide. In this study out by Wilcox, leaky weirs are installed to slow flows and restore historic cienega. We found that NIDS reverse the cycle by capturing the alluvium and storing it behind structures, creating alluvial storage aquifers that detain water for later use and increase recharge in alluvial aquifers. By creating detention ponds, this restoration practice can help water infiltrate in ephemeral streams. Next slide. Natural infrastructure, or NIDS, can establish regenerative wetland sinks that reverse desertification and strengthen climate resilience. And I have to say that while we know that beavers are hard workers, with intuitive knowledge about maintenance, humans have to be programmed to that regular maintenance is necessary to keep the structures functioning as needed over time. Other caveats for restoration success include proper site and scaling, the need for abundance of structures, and well-trained practitioners to install them. Next slide. Using NIDS with pictures here on the left of rock detention structures and on the right of beaver dams. Oh, next slide. There we go. There's the pictures I wanted to show you. Can support localized hydrologic cycling by creating series of soil water carbon sinks like wetlands and otherwise dryland streams. Next slide. In summary, these photos show a paired watershed study in the documentary that I released, Regreening a Dryland Watershed. The top two portray exposed bedrock, roots and cobble in an untreated reach. The bottom two demonstrates the sedimentation, vegetation reaction, and increased water availability in the reach treated with structures. This ecohydrology depicts the same functional ecosystem presented previously in this glass bottle. Next slide. This is that map that I mentioned, which I have described, some of which today that we've been doing work to document and reduce risks associated with climate change. NIDS have been utilized in the North American Southwest for millennia and can be adopted now to create and restore wetlands in arid land environments. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Norman. That was absolutely fascinating. It looks like we have a couple of questions. Mead, I'm not sure, your hand was up. Do you have a question, or was that from previously?
From previously.
Okay, Christina, go ahead. You're on mute, Christina.
I'm sorry. Dr. Norman, thank you so much. I've waited a long time to get you presenting here for us. I'm a huge fan. I would like, if you could please, to talk. I'm very familiar with Valère and Josiah's work, and I did an assessment on the Coronado for TPL when they put it up for sale. And I'm familiar with your paired watershed study, et cetera. But I'm most interested in what you might be doing locally. I note that on your map, the city of Tucson is involved, as well as the Brawley Wash. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, we have just studies related to the carbon sequestration, where we're trying to get soil samples at these locations. And I have been in contact with the Altar Valley Conservation Alliance about trying to document the impacts of structures that they've been installing there under the direction of Bill Zedike and others. So I'm hoping to expand some of our research there. We've been in conversation and doing field trips for a couple years now. But also I wanted to mention that Sapori Wash, there was a great study done by Christine Ullman and Chris Easto, where they documented using isotope analysis, the increase in water recharge at wells in Aravaca that you guys might be interested in. So right now, those sites are limited really to carbon at this time. I'd be very interested, though, if the city of Tucson has some rock detention structure installations that they'd like to be studied.
How would you feel about working with the county in Saguaro National Park West?
I would love to do that. We have been out at Saguaro Park West capturing soil samples at the historic CCC sites, but any rock detention structures are of interest to me. So please reach out and we can get something going, hopefully.
I will be in touch. This is, I think your work is the future. I think I've seen what happened with the El Coronado and how it restored perennial flows, and the results are just absolutely remarkable. And to think that they started in 1983 on bedrock, it's just mind-boggling. So
exactly.
And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch.
Yay.
Oh, thank you. Actually, the San Javier district will also be in touch. But my question has to do with the proposals to put effluent into the streams to bring back something that looks like a stream, but it's polluted. What are your thoughts on, I mean, beavers clean up water. What are your thoughts about utilizing some of these practices to take polluted effluent that's being put back into stream beds and dealing with that situation as well as stream flow?
Oh, great. Yeah, we have a permit request in with San Javier right now. It's already been to, I brought it to the council last spring and sent the proposal into IRB after in the summer, and then sent a revision. So it's there. I'm hoping that San Javier can let us in soon. I did have a previous project with a student looking at structures on San Javier that were being used in an arroyo project with Bureau of Reclamation and other structures. There's a lot of great restoration there. I'd love to help quantify the impacts. In regards to water quality, I do think that there's a lot of potential for structures to increase water quality, not only with non-point source pollutants like sediment, but using our studies with sediment as an indicator of what it can do as far as downstream impacts. It does hold back and push water down, increasing filtration. So I think that there's great potential there. There was a study, ADEQ came out to one of my sites and took a sample downstream of that leaky weir I showed out by Wilcox. And there's at a cattle ranch, and there's no E. coli in the water downstream from that structure. This is just a one-time study, but something I definitely would like to investigate further.
That sounds fantastic. And the presentation was fantastic. I'll leave you with one last thought, and that's that when it comes to next generations and environmental conservation and practices, so much of what you have presented here can be translated. For instance, we're doing our first community park thanks to Eric Shep's group. And, you know, integrating some of these things into that park, which also is designed for green infrastructure for flood control, would be just a wonderful bonus. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that too. Please do contact me.
Yeah, I think we probably should be talking to you. This also aligns with the county's regional climate action plan. We are looking at ways to reduce emissions and address climate change in the region. And we are currently working with our coalition partners, other jurisdictions, as well as internally with Pima County. And we are considering including in our plan a project from the Regional Flood Control District that would basically look at the Altar Valley and the Brawley Wash wetlands. So we're actively doing work in this space to reduce emissions. So I think it would be good or to address climate change, not necessarily reduce emissions, but do look at uptake of carbon dioxide emissions through projects like the ones that the Flood Control District are looking to do. So I do think it would be good to maybe meet with you and discuss your work and see how we can all collaborate on some of these efforts.
And
yeah.
The Altar Valley has done a tremendous job. So out at the Elkhorn Ranch, Mary is actually has a forestry degree from Yale. So you have a rancher out there who's just setting an example that is outstanding in terms of this sort of work. And it really, the Altar Valley has been so decimated by drought and overgrazing and erosion, and just, it's a mess. But she is looking at upland restoration and slowing the flow, and has installed hundreds of structures. So I'm pretty excited about the potential for that as well.
Oh yeah, I've spoken with Mary quite a bit and agree with you about her being fantastic. I did help them create a proposal using a lot of the research that I had done for more structures to be installed this year. So hopefully we can move forward with that, and like I said, potentially set up a research study over there.
Great, thank you. Mead?
Yeah, I wanted to add my gratitude as well for all that you do, Laura. I know a few other contacts that might want to connect with you. I heard that the BLM is starting again on some erosion restoration projects in the Las Ciénagas area.
Yeah,
so
I've been out with Christina Perez recently. Okay. Yeah, I love that they're enacting all of these things that we've been dreaming about for so many years.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear though they're looking to do more too. So that's another local example. And then it could tie again locally. Jennifer Becker, do you already work with her?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. She's at the Regional Flood Control District and works on these kind of things for the county. So paired studies would be awesome. And then I know you know, but others may benefit from knowing that we'd like to have a presentation here at EPAC or at Watershed Planning Subcommittee about the work that flood control is doing, led by Eleonora Demaria. It's just similar to the work Neha Gupta is doing at the U of A, to create a dashboard to show where they believe there may be the most potential for a recharge in the region based on many different data layers. And so it might be a good place for prioritizing future restoration and studies.
And I think
that sounds really great. I do work with Jenny, and I know she does have a lot of projects using structures and a great bit of knowledge about it, and Eleonora as well. I didn't know about that dashboard, but just to be unbiased, is the impacts of recharge are definitely something that, we're interested in, but I don't want to leave out all of the other co-benefits that structures provide too. So yeah, I think it's great each group, identifying their potential use of, gully restoration or increasing habitat or, any of these things. But yeah, thank you for telling me about that.
Hannah?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Norman, for the fantastic presentation. I just want to just quickly say for the EPAC members that this presentation and any others during this meeting will be posted on the EPAC website as reference, just as a reminder.
Great. I think that would be really helpful. Christina?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, have you met Carrie Olson yet from Regional Flood Control? She's taking over the Brawley Wash restoration effort. The IGA has been signed, and so we might be moving forward there. And I just wondered if you'd had a chance to meet with her yet.
No, when I went out there recently with Julia, I remember she was mentioning that person's name. So I would be very happy to be introduced.
Yeah, I think she's going to be great. And we're really excited about that project getting back on track again. Okay, well, gee whiz, there's just so much. Barbara Johnson, could you also get Hannah your contact info? May I also reach out to you? I just want to be able to connect. I know that Eric Holler's done a lot of work on the TON, and I know that Eric Verwees, the ecologist, is looking at doing some work. So I'd like to consult with you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Great. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Norman? All right. Thank you so much for this really excellent presentation. Yes. We learned a lot, and there's so much value in this work in so many different ways, not just in water conservation. So we really appreciate you providing this presentation to us today.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the EPAC Top Environmental Issues List for 2024. You all received a draft, and I believe some of you provided comments. I'm going to hand it over to Hannah Oden to do a review of where we are now.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this presentation for this agenda item, I'm just going to provide information on where we're at with the final draft for the EPAC Top Environmental Issues List for 2024. There we go. All right, so just as an overview and reminder from our last meeting, so the issues list is something that is developed annually by EPAC members in coordination with PAG staff as a revision and update to the previous year's approved list. The issues identified are advisory and inform upper management and regional council on environmental priorities in our region to help inform decision making. And the issues also inform meeting topics throughout the year, which you'll see presentations on throughout the EPAC meetings. So just this slide shows the process that we're in or that we've completed, some of it for developing the issues list draft that is being presented today for consideration. So after the last meeting, which was on October 6th, we received initial feedback from EPAC and subcommittee members on the 2023 approved list. That was revised based on the feedback received, and then a draft was sent to EPAC and its subcommittee members in early November for any additional feedback and comments. So I do want to thank everyone who took the time to provide valuable feedback and information on the issues list, and we really appreciate it because it does make for a comprehensive and well-rounded list that reflects important environmental issues in our region. So what is included in the meeting packet, that final draft of the issues list, is the updated list, including the revised text and new content based on member feedback. So this is an action item to recommend approval of the final draft of the EPAC's Top Environmental Issues List for 2024, which will be forwarded to the PAG Executive Director and then can be shared with Management Committee and Regional Council. All right, so this slide shows the main categories and the issues as they appear in the final draft of the issues list for 2024. So I'm going to briefly walk us through what has changed from the previously approved list, as well as the changes from when the last list was sent out in November for review. So again, these changes, they're derived from member feedback as well as PAG staff updates to reflect current conditions. So something not specifically called out on this slide, but there is a brief introduction section on the issues list. So that was revised slightly to include language for EPAC to track accomplishments and create measurable initiatives to evaluate the process of committee efforts. The healthy environment category was retained, but there were updates to the associated issues, which I'll get into. So the clean air section was updated to include current greenhouse gas emissions information and mention of improved geographic data sets that will aid in planning for alternative modes of transportation. The clean water section now includes language that breaks down solid waste to include both historic landfills and industrial waste to be more specific. Mention of the national primary drinking water regulations were also added, as well as the need to incentivize alternatives to PFAS and other contaminants and the impact of Superfund sites, specifically to human health. The solid waste reduction issue now includes additional language on the importance of innovative solutions, both to reduce landfill waste and reuse materials. So the previous protection and enhancement issue section was revised to stewardship and enhancement to reflect the responsibility that we have of just being stewards and taking care of our environment. This section language reflects regulatory changes for waters of the United States and additional language that addresses fire impacts, which includes the importance of pursuing grants for invasive species removal, fire protection planning, as well as interagency collaboration. Additional benefits for shallow groundwater management were also added to that issue. Wildlife connectivity is a new issue that was added based on member feedback that addresses the importance of maintaining wildlife corridors and utilizing wildlife-friendly designs in both new and existing roadway projects. The section also stresses the importance of utilizing the latest data for decision-making, so related to wildlife movement and other environmental data, and the importance of riparian habitat for protection for maintaining wildlife connectivity. So the next main category is regional resiliency. So that category also had some updates to the issues. So the resilient infrastructure issue was updated just to be more specific on the multi-benefit approach of using recharge areas to create riparian habitat. There's also now mention of tree campaigns and stormwater infrastructure. The resilient economy issue was updated to include mention of the importance of innovative financing for environmental projects, that should be explored. And the water reliability issue was revised to reflect the updated Colorado River shortage from a Tier 2A to a Tier 1 shortage. Resilient infrastructure was also identified as integral for a reliable water supply, and language was expanded to add more detail to issues identified in the Colorado River Basin study. The climate variability section was expanded to reflect current regional efforts and funding to address climate-related risks and greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So this includes the FHWA's new greenhouse gas emissions performance measure rule, which will require ADOT and PAG to establish 4-year on-road CO2 emissions reduction targets by February 1st and August 1st of next year, respectively. So the completed update to PAG's greenhouse gas emissions inventory was also referenced in the section. And the section now includes discussion of resource sharing and jurisdictional collaboration. The implementation of data-driven cross-sector strategies was also added as important to strengthen the clean energy economy and address impacts most often felt by disadvantaged communities. And lastly, the issue that was previously listed as equity and environmental justice. It's at the end of the list after climate variability and is no longer a standalone issue. I just indented it a little bit to try and make that clear. So that is a change from the list, which was sent out last month for review. So the language itself did remain the same and was largely carried over from the previous 2023 list. But we did, there's now reference to the federal Justice 40 initiative to ensure compliance with those requirements, as well as more robust engagement methods. So just as a reminder, this is an action item to recommend approval of the final draft of EPAC's top environmental issues list for 2024. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, or if there's any discussion, or if any other PAC staff want to jump in to add any additional comments for the changes, you can do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. It looks like Barbara's hand is up. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation. I realize we're a month behind and probably should have offered comments earlier, but we're just getting engaged. And one of the things that is important to understand about the communities that we work with, the tribal communities, is that we have very few personal resources to engage in these efforts. And so apology there. But what I would like to say about this is we think this is important. This is, I am assuming, serves as a charter for this group moving forward. And when we read through all of these, we have no problem with the categories. But it seems to be a lot of talk about already ongoing efforts. And it's not clear where we move from those ongoing efforts or connecting to those efforts to a charter for this committee and what we're trying to achieve in terms of influencing upper management with their decisions. So that's a takeaway in pretty much all of the categories. It's also quite general, like efforts will include engaging underserved and overburdened communities in transportation and environmental planning efforts from the beginning planning stages, listening closely to how they're being impacted, and so on and so forth. That sounds good, and we're very, very appreciative of that proposal. It's hard for us to understand how that's going to be put into practice. We understand that most grants involving federal dollars require some explanation of how people are doing this. And it's put in and the grants are received, and then it's still left with, okay, well, how do we connect and how do we influence? The example I have is that, like I mentioned, Eric Shep's group recently, I think we're their 8th project for green stormwater infrastructure. So grateful and pleased with that process. But it's anecdotal or accidental that we found out that we can utilize that as a match for community park, which is part of what the green infrastructure is trying to achieve, is community improvements with that. Thank goodness we found out. And we had 4 weeks to put in a grant that was 84-page grant app, 84 pages of a lot of federal work. And we're able to pull it off. I hope we get the grant. But I bring up that example because, boy, it is a leap between all the good work that we want to do and the practical application of pulling it off. And so I think that those sorts of general statements, and that's just one example, there's other categories, should be maybe more clearly designed as to what we're trying to achieve in this, what we consider a charter. If it's not a charter, if it's just like, we'd like to do this as a group, we just don't understand how we're translating that and how we can best participate. The other area that we continue to be concerned about is effluent and recharge into streams and the quality of that water. Are we seeking to provide the best quality that we can, or are we seeking to provide the lowest cost and but still achieving effluent recharge into the streams? We just, again, we're having a hard time making the connections and how we might be able to fit in with that. So, as I go through these categories, like for instance, resilient infrastructure, it talks about locating recharge of treated effluent to the most cost-effective creation of riparian habitat, and other areas it talks about effluent itself and chemicals and so on and so forth. So I know that's a lot. And I think I probably will vote no. And I know most of you will vote yes. I just think that it might be worth another month to take a look at the categories and how they're written up to better clarify how the EPAC is going to move forward over the next year to connect that to decision making. Thank you for the time for the comment.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was really good feedback. And I absolutely agree with you. One of the things that I think is an issue with the way this is done is that we do every December go through this process and give you all a chance to review this and look at it, but there's not any follow-up beyond it. We just kind of repeat the same process every year where we're looking at these issues and redefining it year to year, but there's not any efforts to actually determine how those issues were addressed throughout the year and how they've changed the collaborative efforts, those types of things. So it's just a list that defines our goals, and but it doesn't provide any information about what actually has been achieved. And so I think there needs to be a kind of a separate or additional process that's incorporated into this so that we can ensure that action is actually being taken. We have very few action related items in this committee. Most of what we do is come together and learn, which is valuable and shouldn't be minimized. But at the same time, we are a committee of experts, and it would be great if we could find a way to utilize this committee to actually make decisions for our environmental decisions for our region. So I would support waiting another month to actually approve this and think about more broadly how we might want to move forward with this issues list and the other comments that you made, Barbara.
Thank you, Natalie. And I just want to say that was said much better than I said. So I appreciate it.
I'm really glad that you said it because I was actually going to say it as well. So I'm glad we're on the same page. And it looks like we have some other hands up. I don't have numbers, so I'm going to call on you as I see you. Kimberly?
I too appreciate Barbara's comments and yours, Natalie. I am often in the same position of wondering, what is achieved, and same as you, I really value the opportunities that everyone here has to learn from each other and from outside individuals we bring on. I would also support fine-tuning these issues lists and perhaps identifying tangible things to assign to people or that people may want to take on to give us more of a sense of progress, a sense of doing, and not just learning. So thank you for those comments, to you too, Natalie. I do want to address something that Barbara brought up, the issue of what quality of effluent we're putting in the river. I think it's super important that we all care about that. And I think it's also super important that we know the high degree to which wastewater treats the effluent that is discharged to the river. We have a fantastic track record of complying with our permits and exceeding the limits that not exceeding unfavorably, putting into the environment very high quality effluent. And that is what we anticipate will happen at Green Valley too. The effluent from the Green Valley facility right now is B+, which is just shy of the highest standard for reclaimed water. And of course, this wouldn't be reclaimed water. This would just be surface discharge. But I am very happy to share water quality data that we have available of what will likely end up in the river. And so feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Mead?
Thank you. I'm sure Hannah can address some of these things too, but I was thinking of some structure that we could consider at PAG to address Barbara's concerns. And it's something that's come up before, that we have this issues list that includes issues, accomplishments, and actions in it. So it's trying to do a lot, and it ends up being boiled down quite a bit. So that would be up to you all to decide if you want it separated so it's more clear, those three categories. And I mentioned that because in our 208 planning that I talked about earlier, that's the format we have to submit it to regional council. So it actually would benefit our water program to be in alignment with that as well. And we could join in the EPAC memo to council if that's where you want to recommend it goes. And then the other thing is each September, I believe it was, that's when we present what accomplishments occurred during the year. So that's not formalized except for in the presentation. That's something to consider as part of our process. And we also select presentations based on this issues list. And in the past, the committee has recommended things like resolutions when they think it would support. And we certainly can't dictate what the jurisdictions each accomplish each year, but we can make recommendations and support those. I hope that clears it up a little bit, and then you can move forward with your own ideas.
Okay, thank you, Mean. David?
I want to thank Barbara as well for actually, like asking us to take a step back and think about really the part of, I guess what struck me is the way we're doing work. And one, I hesitate to bring this up because I'm not volunteering to do the work of this, but it seems to me it would be valuable for there to be scheduled time where everyone who's participating actually gets to know each other a bit and gets to articulate what their investment is, what their aims are for participating in this. There's a way in which the folks who have been here attending for quite a while know each other and have a sense of shared purpose. But when folks are newer, the learning part is great, but the doing is a lot harder when you don't really know who you're doing it with, and what aims you do and don't sort of have in common. So something like that earlier in the year might be really helpful.
That's great, thank you. And that also leads me to another thing, that maybe just getting together in person could be beneficial. We haven't done that since, I believe, pre-COVID, certainly since the time I've been chair. So I think that would offer an opportunity to have a different type of interaction with each other that could be particularly valuable. So I'd like to make that recommendation as well. Howard?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. In reference, I truly believe that the rich woman is just as adversely impacted as the poor woman when it comes to dirty air, dirty soil, and dirty water. And therefore, I believe that the rich woman is just as underserved, disadvantaged, and environmentally stressed as the poor woman. Therefore, I believe that there should be words added that should be something similar to that this committee is in support of clean air, clean water, and clean soil for all equally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Howard. I could provide you with some data to show you that is definitely not the case, at least in the world of air quality. And we can address those issues because there is a lot of data out there that shows that is not the case. So if that's something we want to address in the future, we can, absolutely. Christina?
Thank you, and thank you to Barbara for her excellent comments. I really appreciated what Mead said about breaking this out into, just general information versus maybe aspirational goals for acting on something and making recommendations. I understand that our job is to make a recommendation, not necessarily to finalize anything, but it would seem to me that recommending more collaborative efforts, using Dr. Norman's example of, paired watershed studies and ways to be climate resilient and have multiple benefits on multiple levels. For instance, the county has a habitat conservation plan. The city is reinvesting in finishing theirs. There are opportunities with the nation. There are opportunities with other jurisdictions where we can segue our limited resources to doing some pilot projects that might really benefit our community long term in terms of adaptation to climate change and just livability in our region. I'm wondering if, and I would support stepping back and looking at this list more intently with those sorts of things in mind, making a more uniform approach, a la Mead's recommendations, and moving forward with something more substantive from our committee. Historically, this committee was much more involved in making recommendations to the upper leadership. I had been on the committee many years ago and then off for a number of years. But I will just say, we can certainly do more, and I think we should. So thank you very much for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, Chris. I would agree with that. I used to work at PAG in the early 2000s. This committee used to meet monthly. We also used to have subcommittee meetings much more regularly. Air quality subcommittee, we had a water quality subcommittee. That's been pared down considerably. It doesn't mean that our issues are any less now. So I think that over time, the impact that this committee has had has been minimized. Definitely.
Here. And to David's point, if we met more frequently or had more opportunity, I think that would be a great thing. I would be very willing to give more of my time and energy if I thought it was going to be useful. I mean, really, and to get back to doing something useful. That would be great.
Yeah, it's difficult because we do make recommendations, things that don't make it to the agenda. We ask for agenda items, they don't make it. We ask for people to be nominated to sit on this committee. Those requests are not allowed to be put on our agenda. So we are very limited in what we can do with this committee because of being stopped by leadership. Jeanette?
Thanks, Natalie. I just wanted to quickly address David's concern. That's a good point. And we can certainly move this meeting to either be in person or hybrid. We have found out, since COVID, we've had more participation. We've had more people attending the meeting than not attending. So a hybrid is definitely an option where everybody can participate, but still join in if they can't physically come down to the PAG office. But yeah, that's if the committee wants to take it that direction, that's certainly doable, and of course would give folks the opportunity to get to know each other and put some actual faces with the names.
Great. Thank you. Abigail?
Yeah, thank you. So I wasn't going to speak, and then I volunteered to chair a committee that was going to meet 4 times a year, and now everybody's gung-ho to meet all the time. So I feel that I don't know what Laura's position on this as well is, but I am absolutely willing to help convene more meetings if we think it's useful. If we think subcommittees in between meeting on specific issues are helpful to report back, I think that's frequently a much more efficient use of everybody's time. So I'm also amenable to helping that happen. It sounds like there's interest in some sort of maybe mini retreat from David of a meeting that doesn't have an agenda other than, hey, this is this is my jurisdiction, this is my expertise, this is my interest, these are the connections I have. So we know going forward how we can turn that into action, a la what Mead said of sort of dividing into educational, aspirational, and action items. I had wanted to address the prioritization and the removal of equity and environmental justice as not an issue, but something that is infused in other items. But Barbara Johnson addressed most of my concerns, which is why I took my hand down before. I think that perhaps it would be helpful for us at some point. I'm fairly new to the committee. I don't know if we do this regularly. Perhaps it would be helpful to have another sort of little primer on what environmental justice is, and how to engage it effectively. I think to Howard's point and to Natalie's response, we know with absolute certainty that certain groups of people are, I like the use of the word overburdened. It's not just that they're underserved, but that they're overburdened. That said, the measures that we have to take that prioritize those groups don't harm the people who are currently less burdened. A rising tide lifts all boats, but we got to start with the boats that are like, dredged underwater with holes poked into them. So I think if we're interested in getting a primer on that at some point, I'm sure that we all have our own expertise, but also know other folks we can bring in. So I just want to thank everybody for this very lively and active conversation, and the energy you're all bringing forward to this, and express my willingness to do more work on this if that's what the coming year is going to bring us.
Great, thank you. It sounds like we have some good ideas. I love the idea of having something like a retreat, and I also like the idea of having more just subcommittee meetings where we have experts, subject matter experts, where we can talk about issues more specifically. And maybe I think that would be a little more beneficial than having everybody with different expertise, like we do with this committee. We can definitely drill down on some of these topics more deeply and get to action a little easier if we can meet separately as experts on particular topics. And then as far as the equity issue goes, this draft version had it at the top with a title. It was moved to the bottom and the title was removed. I think that's an effort to minimize that topic, and I don't want to do that. I think it's really important to keep it up top. It is a cross-cutting issue. It's not a carve-out issue of its own. And it needs to be embedded in the work that we do, all the different work that we do. So I would like to see it, if we're going to move forward with the issues list, actually moved back to the top with the title that it had previously. And if we need to address our different thoughts on that, we can definitely we can work towards trying to provide more education on that and more discussion in the future as well. Barbara?
Thank you. I would be happy to be involved in any of those discussions concerning the underserved and the overburdened. I just joined the San Javier district 8 weeks ago, and the planning department. And the planning department handles, which is 3 people, burials, housing, planning, transportation. If we need a new marker, we buy a brick and we paint it and we varnish it. The amount of work that goes into maintaining the community, even outside of maintaining the larger regional efforts, is something that I think most people don't understand. And I think raising the understanding is important. And certainly, yes, air quality is well documented. But it really is pretty cross-cutting in terms of all impacts. And the Tohono O'odham Nation, which is our neighbor, right? We are part of this PAG, has the world's highest rate of diabetes 2. That's because they went from eating 40 things to being in this today's environment. They were hunters and gatherers, and now they're agriculture. So everything we do with water and all of those things that were brought up today are so important to us, and we will integrate many of what we learned today into our comprehensive plan. But I'm not going to go on, but I do want to be a part of the conversation when it comes up, because I think understanding goes a long ways when it comes to these communities, which are largely isolated. Also, the poverty rate, which is defined as, I think, 31,000 for 4 people, is 67%. Think about that and think about your lives and think about that rich woman versus the poor woman. And then think about all the community things that we all have in terms of transportation and food and education, and even this community park that, like I said, the Pima County Regional Flood Control District was a big part of making happen, has been planned for 30 years. And even though the land has been inhabited for several thousand by these folks, this will be the first community park. So I hope that that leaves you with, I guess, a reinforcement of what you said, Natalie, in terms of keeping this as a focus. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Barbara. David.
I just wanted to applaud Abigail. I have never seen someone respond so positively to a bait and switch. So that's really lovely and encouraging that you didn't run screaming from the rest of this Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So we have been asked to have a motion on this. So would anybody like to, after our discussion, have a motion? And if so, what would that motion be? Christina?
Madam Chair, I move that we postpone final adoption of the EPAC's top environmental issues list for 2024, and that we have at least one more meeting before we do adopt it, whereby recommendations for modifying the format and the order are encouraged for discussion. I will also just say on my part that I thank Barbara and you yourself, Madam Chair, and Abigail and everyone else for the very thoughtful way you're approaching this. And I'm hoping very much that we can have a meeting where we can have a more robust discussion and incorporate Mead's suggestions, et cetera, before this goes forward. And I am right behind you with putting the equity issues right back at the top. But that said, I move that we postpone and have more discussion prior to adoption.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor. So
I'll second it.
Okay, great. All those in favor or say aye. Or any discussion? I'm sorry, any discussion? I'm trying to do this properly. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. We will go ahead and bring this to the next meeting. That was a really great discussion that I think was very necessary. So I really appreciate Barbara getting that conversation started and everybody who was able to chime in with their thoughts about it. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 8, which is the EPAC membership and vacancies. And we're going to have Hannah once again give us an update on that.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for everyone who's still in the meeting. For this agenda item, I'm going to discuss what was covered in the memo that was sent out a couple days ago related to EPAC committee membership, structure, and vacancies. So EPAC was established in 1978 by the PAG Regional Council. EPAC responsibilities include providing information, technical assistance, review and recommendations regarding regional environmental issues in compliance with relevant federal and state law, rules, and regulations to the PAG Executive Director, PAG Management Committee, and PAG Regional Council. So EPAC member composition is actually based on federal requirements associated with PAG's area-wide water quality management plan, or the 208 plan, which Mead presented on earlier in this meeting. So this really includes striving for diverse representation and meaningful engagement within EPAC. So EPAC consists of voting members and ex officio members. Ex officio members are non-voting members who serve as liaisons with groups, organizations, or agencies. Ex officio members may actively participate in committee discussions, but may not make motions or vote or hold the position of chair or vice chair, but always appreciate their involvement and the discussion. Voting members for EPAC. So these include members from each of PAG's member jurisdictions, including one citizen representative from each member jurisdiction. There are also groups that represent a number of interest areas. So I'll just rattle those off real quick. So that's the public interest area, professional, technical, environmental, natural resource conservation, the energy industry, mining industry, and construction industry are also represented, as well as local businesses, education and research, and transportation. Non-voting ex officio members include the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, the Arizona Department of Water Resources, the Arizona State Land Department, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Region 9. So all members and agencies are allowed one official representative and up to 2 alternates. However, the City of Tucson and Pima County, those have three official members and then the associated alternates. So the official representatives for EPAC, so those are members who can vote and make motions. Alternates, if an official representative is unable to attend a meeting, then an alternate can step in to vote and make a motion in their place. But of course, both official reps and alternates can attend the same meeting. So now I'm going to talk about move on to discussion of filling vacancies within the committee. So it is important to have vacancies filled in the committee just to really ensure diverse and complete representation within our region, and to make sure that every member agency has a voice and opportunity to collaborate on regional environmental planning issues. Jurisdictional, citizen, and ex officio representatives are appointed by the entity that they represent, and they may serve until they no longer represent the appointing entity, or until they are replaced, or if they are replaced by that entity. Jurisdictions, agencies, and organizations may at any time name replacement member representatives or alternates. So there's no formal process that we require from PAG, so we just need to be informed and we update the information on our end. So for example, if there is a change to an official representative, maybe from a member jurisdiction or an alternate, we just need to be informed and we'll update the member roster on our end. But again, that can happen at any time under the discretion of the jurisdiction or other representing agency. I also want to spend some time on citizen representatives, because this is an area where there has been ongoing vacancies. Right now we have one citizen representative, Chuck Stack from Oro Valley, who's representing that jurisdiction. So I wanted to spend just a little time talking about the process for that, to maybe try and help make it a little more clear and hopefully not muddy the waters. But each jurisdiction is responsible for their own internal process for appointing a citizen representative. So this may require formal approval by elected officials, or it could potentially be administrative. That's up to each member jurisdiction. So just because I am more familiar with it, I'm going to use Oro Valley as an example. So if I'm recalling everything correctly, I'm sure Chuck and Alexandra Chavez can speak a little more to this, but the position for the citizen representative that's listed by the town, there's an application process. There's actually a brief interview. If there's a citizen who's interested in serving in that capacity, a recommendation is then made to the mayor and council, and then they actually vote on appointing that citizen representative. So Oro Valley would be an example, just speaking from experience, where there's maybe more of a formal process. There might be another jurisdiction that may just have an administrative process where a citizen representative could be appointed administratively by a staff member. So we're happy to help in any way that we can, if there's anything we can do to help fill those vacancies. If you're unsure about your own jurisdictional process, a good place to start might be checking with the clerk. Perhaps the town clerk, Oro Valley, that's who was in charge. So that's what comes to mind for maybe a good place to start. So again, we would love to have those citizen representatives, excuse me, spots filled. So again, if there's anything we can do, we're happy to help. So moving on, so if a particular interest group is no longer able to represent an interest group category, PAG will solicit names of candidates from EPAC to fill the vacancy. PAG staff will present the qualifications of the new interest group to EPAC for consideration. Following EPAC's nomination of candidates, PAG staff will solicit endorsement from the PAG executive director, followed by appointment by the executive director. So for example, if I'm going to pick on Tucson Audubon Society, if they're no longer able to represent the environmental interest area, then EPAC could bring forth nominations for another representative group. So I see David laughing up there. We hope you stay on, absolutely. But that was just an example, or any interest group, it would follow that process. And then the interest group could appoint their own official and alternate representatives. So PAG staff, we regularly update the EPAC membership roster to reflect current representatives and vacancies. The roster is posted on the PAG website within the PAG committee fact sheet document. So that shows the current members as well as any vacancies. Again, with some recent changes, we still need to get an updated one up on the website, but we do keep an updated list. We also retain an interested parties email list so that a broader range of folks can be kept in the loop just on EPAC meetings and updates. We can add people to this interested parties list at any time. So if there's any groups or people that you'd like to add, let me know, or they can reach out to me directly. We can ensure that they are included in that interested parties email list. So that concludes, I think, all the points that I wanted to bring up, but yeah, happy to answer any questions or if there's any discussion.
Thanks, Hannah. I have a question. Based on what you just said, a couple of months ago, we lost the position for the technical seat. And there is a new person who has put their hand up to fill that role, but we haven't been allowed to add that to the agenda so it can come to our committee. Could anyone from PAG explain to me why that's happening?
So I'll start and then I can defer to Jeanette if there's anything else, but thought was that for this meeting, can discuss the process of filling vacancies, the structure of EPAC, just provide a little more background and information. And then the intent would be to add that as an item to the next agenda. And Jeanette, if there's anything you wanted to add, I'll defer to you.
No, that pretty much covers it, Hannah. Yeah, there was this issue of one individual coming up, that was brought to the attention of the committee, and it was our position to say, okay, well, let's take a holistic look at the vacancies and making sure that the committee is set up. We know there's a lot of new folks that are part of the committee. So it was decided just to do an overall presentation on who sits on the committee, the different types of groups, how they get appointed, and the vacancies that we currently have. And then hopefully we could bring that together as a whole recommendation to the executive director to say, hey, here's all the spots we would like to have filled. Hannah brought up a good point that, every jurisdiction has their own process for bringing on a citizen rep. And so, it's sort of this, like, we'd like to have the whole committee, the composition of the committee put together and bring that forward. We do, as Hannah mentioned, we do have the list on the website. That only gets updated once a year. I believe they do it in January when they do the committee handbook. So that'll be coming out soon, where we're gonna be asked to present who is on the committee and then do that update on the website. So it's more of just a big sort of let's circle our wagons, get our names, and then get that updated. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. In this case, that particular representative did need to drop out before the end of the year. So if we have to wait until, that happens every year to do it one time, it's going to be limiting, I think, because that's going to happen where people won't be able to fulfill a year-long term or whatever. So, and it does seem to me that the process isn't being followed properly based on this particular circumstance, that this person is waiting to basically be on this committee. And the next step was supposed to be go to the EPAC to actually have it reviewed by us, to have us vote on it. Then it goes to the executive director. We have not been allowed to put it on the agenda, and I don't think that is, I just think it's a violation of the bylaws. So I think PAG needs to be really mindful of the process and make sure that you're actually following your own process. Abigail?
Thank you. So I've sought clarification on this term before on other PAG committees. So I know that the word citizen doesn't mean citizen of the United States with lawful status. But I do think that that's important when we have large members of our regional community who are not necessarily US citizens, to make it clear that the citizen representative role does not actually have to have US citizenship, that we're using the term citizen in terms of like citizen of the world. And I'm wondering if we can't change that terminology to make it more clear that what we really want is somebody who can represent their jurisdiction because they live there and care about it, not because of their status.
Can't we just call them a representative?
Love it. But that's a question for PAG.
Yeah, I can answer that, or at least attempt to address it. Abby, that's a good point. And that's why PAG doesn't get involved in who is selected specifically. So the jurisdictions can nominate whoever they want to represent the community. What we want to avoid is we want it to be a citizen who's not affiliated with either a public agency or any of the interest groups that are listed in the bylaws. So yeah, we could definitely look at, how else we could say that, but really just want to make sure the intent is that each jurisdiction is nominating their citizen rep, and that's not a person that works for that jurisdiction, but it truly is sort of an outside representative. So I think that's where that language got, the intent of it is to solicit somebody like that, but we don't go and check anybody's status with, as actual citizens of the US or anything like that. We don't do that. We rely on the jurisdictions to submit someone that they feel fills that role the best.
Excuse me, this is Chris. Couldn't we just call them jurisdictional representatives then?
We could, but that might imply a jurisdictional representative is a employee of the jurisdiction.
So maybe we can wordsmith and kick around some terms that make it clear this person's not a governmental official.
Maybe resident, jurisdictional resident, because really the requirement is that the person live within the jurisdiction in order to fill those roles, is my understanding. So maybe we could think about the term resident instead of citizen, something.
And we might need to consider if that's true for all the jurisdictions. I'm not sure if the Pasquayaki and Tonaldum require them to reside there as much as be members of their nation.
Okay.
So maybe community or something like that.
Okay. All right, Jeanette, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Your hand's still up?
Nope, just didn't lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay. All right, I don't see any other hands, so I think we can go ahead and move on to our next and last agenda item, the future agenda items. Does anybody have any recommendations they'd like to make for future agenda items?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Christina.
I think it's time we had a presentation on wildlife connectivity. And I think it might be a good idea to consider a panel because, of course, there's more than one interested party working on these issues. And I'm happy to work on that suggestion further and help refine it. I would include people like Saguaro National Park, Pima County, perhaps the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, and just have a little bit of an update on where we're at and why it's important and what our goals are.
I like that idea. And I'm also thinking, Christina, that's a topic that really overlaps with the Transportation Committee, the Transportation Planning Committee, and some of the projects that they consider. So
indeed,
that's another thing that I don't see happening is any overlap between the Transportation Committee and other committees at PAG and this committee that have, that may have that overlapping topics. So,
well, Madam Chair, there was a wildlife working group that was a part of PAG's original founding for regional transportation in 2006. And that working group was never decommissioned formally, but it has vanished from the PAG website. All the materials that were developed, which are scientifically valid, all of the things we invested in have vanished from the website. And that's probably why there's no overlap anymore. So I don't know what the proposal is for the future, if we're going to try to get the public to support another 20-year plan. But without that element, I think the public support is going to be far less. And I'm interested in how that will go forward, but that's a separate topic. I agree with you, there's not any overlap at the moment, but I'd like to help remedy that situation by suggesting it be a future topic for our committee, at least.
Great.
And of course, invite the Transportation Committee and all other subcommittees to join in.
Absolutely. Thank you for that suggestion. David?
Chris may know, other folks, have there ever been joint meetings of the two committees?
There have been joint meetings in the past of numbers of subcommittees and committees. That used to happen fairly regularly when there were overlapping topics. That was a number of years ago under a previous executive director.
Because I definitely appreciate, Natalie, showing the connection with the Transportation Committee as well on this issue.
Madam Chair, not to interrupt, but I just need to remind everybody that due to open meeting law, we can only recommend future agenda items and not discuss them at this time. So if you guys are recommending specific conversations for future agendas, please limit your conversation to that.
Okay. I have another recommendation. We were told when PAG did a presentation on the carbon reduction program that we would be waiting on ADOT's strategies to be released before we heard again about that topic. And now those strategies have been released. So I would like to request that we hear back from PAG on the actions that PAG is taking with the millions of dollars that are being given to PAG to address reducing carbon emissions from the region. And I would also like to discuss how this committee and the subcommittees of this committee can be involved in those decisions. As well, I would also like to recommend a future agenda item regarding the Priority Climate Action Plan that will be submitted by the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality to the EPA by March 1st. We will have recommendations and projects listed within that Priority Climate Action Plan. And I would like to bring that to the committee once it is finalized. I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to assume we don't have any other future agenda items to suggest. So our last agenda, oh, Abigail?
Just want to make sure that we do get that 2024 priorities on a future agenda as we discussed today.
Yes, absolutely. That should be at the next meeting, which I'm not sure when that will be, but it should be at the next meeting. Okay, then I will go ahead and move to adjourn. Thank you all for your time, and it's been great working with Christina as my vice chair for the last 2 years. And
thank you.
Oh, Charles, did you have one more thing you wanted to say?
Yes, Robert's Rules of Orders were written in 1876. I don't think they had Zoom. I would like to propose that everyone unmute and give Natalie Shep a round of applause for her excellent service on this committee. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Very nice of you. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. And I will still be a member of this committee and attending all the meetings. I've been happy to do it. It's been really wonderful working with you all. All right. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Hi, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Natalie.
Bye, everyone.